Chapter 4. I left them to it and went to the bathroom to get a drink. And there was someone on the landing. A dark shape was lurking in the shadows next to the window at the front of the house. My heart stumbled, and I gasped, backing away towards the nursery door. I wanted to scream, but just as in my nightmares, I couldn't make any sound at all. The murderer was here and was about to catch me alone. The shape shook itself loose of the shadows and came creeping towards me. "Hazel," said Stephen's quiet voice. "Hazel, stop, it's me." My voice came back with a gasp. "What are you doing there?" I said. I thought you... "Terribly sorry," said Stephen. "I didn't mean to upset you. I only wanted to find a place to think." Trying to quieten my heart, I went to stand next to him at the window. It is a lovely round one, like a porthole in the sky, and ivy wiggles across it like thin fingers. You can see the drive and some of the monkey puzzle tree. Outside it had finally stopped raining, and there was a thin glaze of moonlight over everything that had made the monkey puzzle look as if it had been cut out with scissors. "Are you all right?" Stephen asked me quietly. "Yes," I whispered back. "I suppose so. Are you?" "Sometimes I don't feel as if I shall ever be all right again," said Stephen. I wanted to say that this was exactly what I had been feeling too, without being able to explain it. "I wish this was all over," I said miserably. "I wish it had never begun," said Stephen, scowling. He rested his forehead against the window pane and shivered. When he leaned back again, his hair was damp and sticking up, and there was a little drop of water curling down his cheek. "My father killed himself," he said quietly. "Did you know that? This weekend. It's brought it all back. It feels like it only happened yesterday. It feels like it's still happening." I didn't know what to say. I stared out at the tree and noticed it made angles in the shadow on the drive, that I could see every single funny leaf. "I feel like that sometimes too," I said at last. "Last year, a mistress at our school died, and I found her. I touched her. It wasn't very nice. Daisy thinks I should forget about it, but I can't somehow." It was Stephen's turn to nod. "I'm sorry about your father," he said. "Thank you. Listen, Hazel, you mustn't worry. What I mean to say is you're quite safe. Bertie and we won't let anything happen to the four of you. I can promise that." He paused, and I paused too, looking at him. Everything seemed frozen until a little gust of wind shook the panes in front of us and made us start. "And the police are coming," I said. "Inspector Priestley will help us." I hoped I was right. It was only after I was back in the nursery that I realised I had forgotten to get that drink. Daisy, Kitty and Beanie were still talking, so I sat up in bed and began to write in this casebook. When there was a knock on the nursery door, I nearly jumped out of my skin, but it was only Mrs. Doherty coming up with our dinner. It was eggs and soldiers again, and a jam roly-poly. We must be very close indeed to solving the crime now, but all the same, I'm still not sure that this is a case that the Detective Society ought to solve. There seems to be something lying just out of reach, waiting for us. Part 6. The Detective Society solves the case. Chapter 1. On Monday morning I woke up with a jolt and found that I was still clinging to this casebook and that my pencil had got loose and gone in scribbling snail trails across my bedsheets. Daisy was shaking my arm, and in my ear the house's pipes were singing and shaking the bed as someone ran a bath in the nursery bathroom. "Hazel," Daisy was saying. "Hazel, Hazel, Hazel, wake up." "I'm awake," I said. "Ow!" "Hazel, a miracle has happened. Miss Alston is taking a bath." I couldn't quite see how this was a miracle. Miss Alston was not a particularly dirty person. "Hazel, don't be slow. What don't people take into bathrooms, even if they carry them everywhere else? What is liable to get all steamed up and unpleasant if it sits next to a hot bath?" I suddenly saw what she was getting at. "A handbag. Indeed, Watson, indeed." We beamed at each other. "Up, we must work quickly," said Daisy. "Kitty, I want you standing outside the bathroom, listening for movement. Beanie, you can stand guard just outside Miss Alston's room to whisper to us if Kitty gives the alarm. And Hazel, you come into the room with me." "But I want," Kitty began. "No arguing," cried Daisy. "I am the Detective Society president, and in this case you must respect my authority, because I know what I am talking about, and I solved a real murder case last year with Hazel. All right, are you ready?" Kitty and Beanie nodded, although Kitty's nod was slightly reluctant. "Excellent," said Daisy. "Ready, Watson?" "Ready," I said. and we crept out of the nursery doorway onto the upstairs landing. The noise from the pipe stopped as Kitty positioned herself outside the bathroom, and Beanie stood nervously just outside Miss Alston's door. Daisy and I gave the Detective Society handshake once for luck, and then Daisy pushed open Miss Alston's door. We were inside again. The bed was made, the drawers were closed, and Miss Alston's brown handbag was sitting plumply on her pillow. "You-halloo, Watson," hissed Daisy, eyes shining. "I knew we'd get it in the end. I knew it." She leaped towards it like a cat. "Careful," I said. "You'll spill it. She mustn't know we've been here," said Daisy. "There's no time for that." In one movement, she spun the handbag upside down, and everything inside it tumbled out across the covers. It was as though Miss Alston had pinched her bag from Mary Poppins. Out came ruled paper and notebooks and biscuits and maps and set squares and a compass and a bar of Fry's chocolate and a packet of pins and a needle and thread and something flat and spiky made of silver that glinted up at us. "What's that?" I whispered. "And what's this?" hissed Daisy, and she picked it up and peered at it. Then she dropped it as though it had burned her. "Hazel," she said, "you won't believe this. Look." I looked. The silver thing was a badge, small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. It had a little silver crest at the top. "Metropolitan Police," it read. But how did she get this?" I asked. "It's a police badge." "Do you think she stole it?" asked Daisy. "Gosh, what if she's actually a criminal, just like Mr. Curtis was?" "Oh, we've got evidence at last. Miss Alston stole from a police officer, huh? And here, under all that, are the papers that I do believe will finally incriminate her." Out of the bottom of the bag, with a flourish, she pulled a crumpled letter. "It's from the police," cried Daisy. "Look at that official letterhead, and it says—" I bent over her and read. "Oh," I said. Daisy and I stared at each other in utter shock. "Dear Miss Livden, you have been assigned to an undercover post at Fallingford House, home of Lord and Lady Hastings. You will pose as governess to their young but not at all impressionable daughter, Daisy Wells, and secretary to Lord Hastings, and you are asked to watch the movements of Mr. Dennis Curtis, who will be arriving as a guest of Lady Hastings at an upcoming weekend party. Curtis is a notorious thief whose method seems to be to ingratiate himself with the lady of a large country house in order to gain access to the house's contents. After a brief visit, he leaves, and several priceless artefacts, usually including jewels, leave with him. We need you to catch him at it, to be blunt. You have been furnished with the appropriate references, but Lord Hastings is of a trusting disposition, and so you are not likely to be grilled on your life story. Nevertheless, the daughter is another matter, and so it would be advisable to be on your guard around her. The name on your letters of reference is Miss Lucy Alston. I wish you good luck, and will, of course, deny all knowledge of you if pressed. M. "Young, but not at all impressionable," gasped Daisy. "Hazel, look, I told you I was famous." I felt that she was rather missing the point. "But now we know who Miss Alston really is," I said. "This is the secret she's been hiding. She didn't steal from the police. She's one of them." "Oh, yes," said Daisy, coming back to earth. We gaped at each other. Miss Alston, a policewoman. She had been watching Mr. Curtis because she had been sent to catch him. That was why she had been acting so suspiciously, and why Mr. Curtis had threatened her on Saturday morning. He must have realised that she was really from the police, and of course Miss Alston, Livden, must have begun her own investigation in Mr. Curtis's death. She must have taken his notebook from his room and then dropped it. That was why we had found it on the landing outside the nursery. When we overheard her speaking to Stephen, she had not been threatening him. She had been trying to interrogate him, to find out what he knew about the murder. "Well," said Daisy, "I said she was too clever to simply be a governess." "Oh, golly, imagine, we've been taught by a policewoman, an undercover one, Hazel." Then I had a thought that wriggled uncomfortably at the bottom of my stomach. "But if she's a policewoman, Daisy, she can't be the murderer. You aren't allowed to murder people, are you? Even when you're on an undercover mission." "But," Daisy began. "Daisy," whispered Beanie outside. "Daisy! Hazel! Kitty says she's getting out." Quick as a flash, Daisy piled everything back into the handbag. It went in higgledy-piggledy, and I was only glad that it had been such a mess in the first place. Miss Alston, Miss Livden might never know it had been searched. Daisy seized my hand and we scuttled out. Beanie was bouncing up and down in an agony of fear, while Kitty stood with her hands pressed to her mouth. She let out a rush of breath when she saw us. "I thought you'd never come out," she hissed. The bathroom door opened and Miss Alston emerged, hair damp and wearing a robe. She looked around at us all, at Beanie trembling, at Kitty all red in the face, and at Daisy and me, both trying desperately not to look at her bedroom door. Had we closed it properly? "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Hurry downstairs to breakfast at once. Beanie, I think your father will be able to come for you and Kitty today." And she swept into her bedroom and shut the door behind her. "Come on," cried Daisy, and she went rattling down the main stairs like a dynamo. "What did you find?" gasped Kitty as we dashed along behind her. "What happened?" "Miss Alston is a policewoman," I said, "on a secret mission to catch Mr. Curtis. She can't have done the murders." "But," said Kitty, "if she's a policewoman, there are only 2 suspects left." "I know," I said, and my heart sank horribly. "Uncle Felix and Daisy's father."